Climate and deep tech. Deep tech and climate. These are the biggest buzzwords I've heard here since I entered the building. So what do we mean when we say deep tech and climate? We love deep tech, right? As Israelis, we are in love with technology. We love to be early adopters. We love innovation. We love the high-tech sectors. And we're using the high-tech sector as the locomotive of the entire economic industry. But there are things that we as Israelis, we don't like, right? We don't like standing in queues. We don't like being on time. But innovation is one thing we do like. So the next session is all about hardcore climate innovation. And what is it that we're talking about, the deep in climate tech? So we'll soon invite my colleagues to the stage to talk about that. But first, why do we need deep? Why do we need real hardcore technology in climate? Well, let me remind you something. CO2 is a molecule. And as a molecule, you cannot just blockchain it away. You cannot SaaS it away. You cannot cybersecurity it away or fintech it away. You cannot software it away. This is a real thing. And we have an Herculean task in front of us. Everything we touch, everything we drive, everything we wear, everything we smell is made out of dinosaur bones, fossil fuel. And we need to replace that, which means we need to replace everything. We need to replace all the products and processes, all the goods that we know. Now, that sounds to me like something that is good for the planet, but actually, it sounds to me like a great business. Fixing the planet is just a great business. We're gonna make a lot of money fixing the planet. How much money? 1, 2 orders of magnitude bigger than the digital revolution. And remember, the digital revolution brought us Google, Amazon, Facebook, category leaders. But at that same time now, companies that are building hardware technologies to tackle climate and to decarbonize the economy, they are completely inventing new industries. Think sustainable aviation fuel, think direct air capture, think alternative proteins. Industries that were not there before and are happening now and are reinventing new categories and shifting wealth from the old economy to the new decarbonized economy. Have a look at what is market cap of BP, Shell, Equinor, what it took to pollute, to emit all these CO2. That is the order of magnitude that we're gonna go and see into the green industries. Now, I believe that Israel has a profound place to play in this role. And this is why we as an Extantia, we double down on Israel. And this is why the entire team of Extantia is today here. Stand up. Go talk to these guys. We have already done 3 investments in Israel, and we will do more. We also have a person on the ground here. And we yesterday announced that we have 300 million to invest in two funds. One is direct, where we're investing in decarbonizing industries, in companies that can really move the needle on climate. And the second is a fund of funds, where we're investing in mission-aligned funds and fund managers. 3 of them are also here in Israel. So there is a lot to be done, and there is a lot to be done in Israel. So without further ado, I would like to call to my colleagues, Ashwin Shashindranath, he is a partner at Energy Impact Partners, and Kopelyan from IndieBio. I'll try not to be the host, but to do some kind of a ping pong. Let's see if that works. Spontaneous, we just practice it a lot. So guys, let's jump right into the elephant in the room. Yeah, we know what happened in CleanTech 1.0. We know this is hardware. Everybody is talking. Everybody here likes software. As VCs, we love software, but this is hardware. To move the needle, we need hardware. But can it meet the cycle of the VC? Can we actually make VC returns with hardware?
So just grateful to be here. Just a short introduction about Energy Impact Partners. We're a $3 billion AUM fund, and we're entirely focused on leading all of us to a sustainable future through this energy transition. We've been around since 2015, a variety of different strategies, but we're sort of unique as a venture fund. We've brought together some of the largest corporations and innovators to come alongside with us to work in a very collaborative model where we're investing in and helping companies pilot and commercialize their technologies. We've got about 50 corporations that are part of our EIP consortium, from utility companies to energy companies to real estate and technology companies that are all supporting us in this. And the key thing that we do for startups is figuring out ways to help them go from 0 to 1 and help them pilot their technologies and commercialize their technologies. I specifically lead what's called as our Deep Decarbonization Frontier Fund, which is about a $485 million fund that's entirely focused on investing in breakthrough ideas and moonshot ideas that will have a huge impact on climate change. So in terms of answering your question, I think there's a lot of things going on. 15 years ago, if you wanted to start a bank, it probably took you 3 to 4 years to go through the approval process and to figure out ways to make that bank happen. You can now start a neobank probably in 6 months or less. And I think the reason that's happening is it took a lot of early entrepreneurs to break through and to figure out ways to build the foundational technologies which can then be used to then create neobanks or other banks on top of that. So that early fintech ecosystem and evolution. I think the same thing might happen in climate, and I expect it to happen in climate, where the early pioneers worked on solar and storage and all those technologies for the last 15 years and wind. And we're now at a point where it's all very mature, and now you can start to build on top of that and figure out ways to really accelerate the next stage of deep decarbonization. So that's one point. And then the other point, I'm just going to talk about is if you're an entrepreneur and you're working on a deep tech climate company now, the mantra should be, how do you figure out the economics at the smallest scale possible, which is how do you make sure that the technology that you're working on, the product that you're working on works at the really small scale. There's no reason to build large factories or large pilots and waste a lot of capex when the problem hasn't been fully solved. And so it's important to get those problems solved early on. And if you did that, I think you can see exciting outcomes and not have to waste money like we did with biofuels back in 2008, 2009. So thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me. A quick thing about IndieBio. We're an early stage, mostly biotech focused accelerator program and later stage investor following on. We focus on giving essentially the first check, so people at formation stage of a company from all around the world. Focusing on the question at hand, I think we're in bio is a really heavy capex industry. It scares a lot of people. It needs a lot of steel in the ground. And what we find is really one of the critical things is actually typically business model and go-to-market design for a startup. Everyone almost in biology has a platform, and they're really, we think a lot if you can focus on how do you build a first product and kind of, as Ashwin said, demonstrate proof of concept and be able to really island hop into value. Most of that capex shouldn't be borne by your venture investors. And thinking of how you partner, JV, get venture debt, and everything else is really one of the big game changers there. And then the other part around returns, I think we are seeing software valuations come down to earth a little bit, as money is a little bit less kind of getting thrown around for free. And people are remembering that things like energy, food, protein, plastic materials is actually a really important industry. And whether it's good times or bad times, that's going to actually, these are things that matter no matter what. which is a really big part of that as well.
Alex, in 20 seconds, can you give an example of a company in the portfolio? Maybe we could do a quick round of that people can understand what can really, when we're saying move the needle on climate, what do we really mean? Let's give an example maybe.
Yeah, one of the companies that comes to mind first is an Argentine company called STAM. They're reinventing the bioreactor from the ground up. So they have, instead of the design of like giant steel tanks that are the size of buildings, they're making things that are the size of refrigerators that actually can have the same throughput, if not higher. And it's a really interesting example of how hardware innovation can actually make biology function better because it's designed for the optimized state of biology, as opposed to us continuing to use infrastructure that's many, many decades old. So it's really applying new computational tools to design.
Thanks, Alex. So I'm going to take more than 20 seconds, if that's okay. There's always lots of discussions around whether companies exit in the right time, venture scale, venture timelines, 10-year fund returns. Most venture funds, for those who don't know, it's 10 years is usually how it's set up. They usually have a couple of extension periods, couple of years to extend it out. What we've done is we've gone non-traditional. We've set up a 15-year fund because we recognize it's going to take time for these companies to mature and to get to the right type of success. The joke is you can make a baby in a month the same way you can't make nuclear fusion probably happen in a month either. It's going to take some time to prove the technology and then to commercialize the technology over time. And then the other point here is that you don't really need to wait for full maturity to go public. Public markets can be opened much earlier for these types of companies. The IPO market's a little tight right now, but when it opens up, it's going to be just fine to go public at a much earlier valuation. I think the classic example is an Israeli company, SolarEdge, that you probably all are familiar with. I think last I heard, somebody was saying this yesterday, it's the biggest publicly traded company in Israel now, and it's a climate tech, deep tech company. And they went public at 600 million in valuation in 2015, but they've returned 25 times since 2015 to 2022. So I do think that it's okay to go public sooner and to get capital much sooner in public markets without having to wait for full maturity. In terms of companies that we've invested in that we really like, I don't pick favorites among babies, but I'll say one example. One is a recent investment in a company called 6K Energy. 6K is based in Boston in the US. Traditionally, cathode materials or other battery materials are made using co-precipitation methods, which take a long time and are not sustainable in their production process. And 6K has come up with a plasma reactor, microwave-based plasma reactor that can reduce the time significantly and also the energy consumption and the cost associated with producing cathode materials. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, can I jump in on something there? I think this is an important point. It reminds me of our phone call prepping a couple of weeks ago when we were saying, sustainable aviation fuel, alt protein, these aren't like 1% of the market, they are the market, where eventually alternate proteins is just protein and fuels is all sustainable aviation fuel. So I think that lends to being public early and going to later stage institutional investors. Once you prove unit economics, you are the same, if not better, than every traditional technology. And entrepreneurs need to not try to slice out and be different in a way, but actually understand how they are that whole market, and they will be in the future for sure.
Yeah, just jumping in, aviation fuel is a great example. It's, I think, a $200 million market right now, addressable market. It's going to be 15 billion probably by 2030 and even bigger by 2050. So huge market opportunities.
This is, for example, why we invested in Aerotech, which is based in Germany, which is doing synthetic e-fuel, taking hydrocarbons, synthetic hydrocarbons, green hydrogen, and then captured CO2 and combines the two and creates jet fuel that is 90% cleaner than the jet fuel that is based on fossil fuels. Guys, what's next?
Yeah, so maybe I'll switch and I'll ask a couple of questions. Where do you guys see the biggest opportunities? What are some of the underfunded areas in deep tech climate now?
So maybe one thing that people underestimate is retrofitting. So we all want to invent new things all the time, but don't forget, as we build new cars and we build new airplanes, we also emit a lot of CO2. And today we build those wind farms and solar farms with tractors that are generated by diesel. So let's not forget that building new things is not necessarily a great thing. And if we can retrofit things, that is actually big impact. So if we can retrofit buildings, if we can retrofit the grid, for example, which is a huge topic, if we can use the current fleet of airplanes and rather than build new airplanes, that would be a big thing for the climate.
For me, a couple of things come to mind, and one of them is, it's interesting being in Israel, I've been thinking more and more about water. So I live in California, and we have huge issues with water that California has, I wouldn't say ignored, but has done a very poor job of planning for. And being here, there's a lot of people who probably spend a lot of their time thinking about it. So I think that's a huge opportunity and needed space around the world, both for agriculture, human consumption, and industrial use. I also look at water beyond fresh water and think of ocean-based climate solutions. I think is a really untapped area. It's beginning to be done in macro and microalgae slightly, but when we think of everyone who's trying to remove carbon dioxide, oceans are kind of the largest sink of CO2 in the world, and there's just massive opportunity space, I think, in water and oceans specifically. I'll give a second plug quickly for any biologists here. I think moving beyond the very few organisms that we use for most of our industrial processes is a really big space. So there's tons of microorganisms, whether it's microalgae, bacteria, yeast, fungi, and I'm always surprised by the really interesting new angles that people take, and it's going to actually help us diversify our infrastructure, and we're going to discover new medicines, new polymers, new foods by doing that.
For me, somewhat controversial, but I actually think that one of the most underfunded areas right now is around nuclear. Nuclear really can solve a lot of the problems that we need to get to. We're big believers in things like nuclear fusion. We've already invested in one company called Zap Energy that's working on nuclear fusion. I think there's a variety of companies here. NT-Tau, I think, is here that's working on fusion. My general opinion is that it's in the next few years, we're going to get to what's called as energy break-even in these fusion companies, which is where what you put in and what you get out is higher than what you put in terms of energy. And once you get there, then it's going to take a lot of work to get to commercialize these technologies, and a lot of effort needs to go into it. But it's clearly underfunded. And my dream is really that either me or my kids are carrying around a little diesel genset, except it's nuclear powered. And hopefully that day is not too far away.
If you talk about fusion, what fusion for you is, for us, is geothermal. So we're big believers, and there is a great Israeli company that is big in the world in geothermal, or MAT. Generally, if we just drill a hole this size, we can provide the entire energy needs of Israel. So we just need to dig deep, more than 5 kilometers, in a very economic way, which today we don't know. But if we solve that, we can send people to Mars, but we cannot dig more than 5 kilometers. But if we dig more than 5 kilometers and the cost stays linear, then there is no energy problem in Israel. There is no energy problem anywhere. And that's why we invested in Slovakia-based company called GA Drilling, that they're using plasma bead in order to drill. It's contactless, and it's reducing the cost of the drilling. So geothermal, I would say, is another underfunded area, which, like fusion, can be a game changer for the world.
Yeah, geothermal is nuclear without the waste. So
exactly.
Absolutely.
So this is an interesting segue. It's kind of, as you invent new markets, you kind of create chicken and egg problems, where on my side, I hear a lot of people talk about finance and novel forms of finance. You guys are talking about regulatory and market issues. So there's a lot of momentum that needs to get created. How do you think about yourselves and helping your founders initiate the flywheel to get these new industries created?
That's a very good question, and maybe I'll talk about the financing element of the flywheel. Now, those companies, we cannot beat around the bush, right? These guys need a lot of money. By the way, software companies need a lot of money as well. So it's not just the hardware, right? But the hardware guys, they need a lot of capex, and they need to finance, and they need more money. So what we tell our founders is work on non-dilutive capital. Yeah, look for a lot of grants. Look for debt. So if you start a new facility, you don't have to power everything with equity. Yeah, there are many corporates today, unlike before, that are willing to sign from the very minute. They are willing to sign offtake agreements and pay now cash to buy all your supply that is going to be in 5 years, because everybody wants some of the good stuff, some of these green gold. So people are paying real cash today. So just tap into it, and thereby you can get non-dilutive equity, capital, sorry.
Yeah, just touching more on the finance topic here. Once these companies get to the early bench scale and benchtop experiments, and they're done with it, and they prove the technology works, there's definitely a lot of capital, like you said, that's needed. We think of first-of-a-kind financing, so we've been thinking a lot inside of Energy Impact Partners around how do we create solutions where we can provide that first asset finance or project finance to back some of these companies and provide the capital that they need to be able to show the maturity of the technology, so infrastructure investors can come in and bank the technology and finance the technology to really scale it up at some point. But the first-of-a-kind financing is a huge gap in the market today, and we're going to start working on those solutions, and there's a couple of others that are working on it too. Breakthrough Catalyst is a good example of a program that's working on that as well. And I just think that more is needed there.
So one thing, I just came from an event focused on food and agriculture, and spent a lot of time talking to folks all from cultivated proteins and biotech to people in regenerative agriculture. And interestingly, I think everyone converged around the need for every founder to be focused externally on education, especially working in the regulatory world and thinking about policy and lobbying. Every industry that people are trying to disrupt, at least I'll speak for the US, has a massive presence in Washington, D.C., lobbying and trying to push policy and subsidies and everything like that. And people who are growing meat or doing other things in agriculture specifically comes to mind. They are facing incumbents that get huge amounts of dollars from the government. And that won't change if founders only stay in their lab. It needs them to talk to big partners and utilize their know-how and infrastructure and actually build coalitions themselves. So I think that's the thing that I've been really thinking about lately that I think matters here.
So I think what we see is that moving the needle is literally, it's hard, right? I mean, this is a very hard, a Herculean task that we face. Now, those companies, unlike, they all face the same challenges as software companies: growth, hiring people, etc. But there are many unique challenges that those hardware companies in new markets are facing. So are there any best practices that you can share from your portfolio that you can give advice to the people and say, okay, this is how you do it?
It's tough to go too specific. It's generalized advice to some extent, but I think especially in biology and in a lot of industries that interface with that, it's really around managing supply chains. I think we have really complex supply chains of inputs, distribution partners, scale-up partners, and at every part of that, people are making the decision to vertically integrate or partner. So a big focus for us is how do we think about when to do these things, because it's typically when and not if, because everyone will have to do it. And if you have a platform technology, being very strategic in how you kind of parcel that out to be partnering or doing it in-house, because that also typically has really big implications on everyone's IP, which is a very important part of making companies investable. So when to license versus stay in-house and deal with partners is one of the biggest questions I think founders will be facing.
I'm going to focus on people. So just, again, generalized, not specific to companies. We're facing droughts, we're facing floods, it's heat waves everywhere. I think the next speaker, Nadav, I saw him in London when it was 40 degrees. It was the first time that It happened in the history of UK. We're all facing these challenges, and I think what we need is more scientists on a mission that are ready to, take the stuff that they've been working on labs and come out and work on some of these problems that will have a huge societal impact. And then, it's funny. I don't think there's any prior experience needed. I was talking yesterday to a VC here in Tel Aviv, and he mentioned, it's easy to recruit people from, the Unit 8100 or 8200 to come work on cybersecurity companies, but you start talking climate, they start yawning, and it's not an easy thing to convince them to come over. I think there's a lot of sometimes fear around the unknown that, climate tech is really hard and it's just not possible. And it's important, I think, to create more awareness. And I think events like this are going to be great to get people to think more about the mission for the planet and not just, securing. And cybersecurity is important, don't get me wrong, but I think climate is just even more important and the planet is even more important. And then one other just quick point there in terms of people and recruiting. This is probably one of the greatest wealth transfers that will happen, as Yair mentioned earlier, from typically fossil-based companies to this new electron-based economy that we're going to get to. And we just need to make sure that we're not leaving people behind. Climate justice is important. We need to make sure that we're training everybody, taking care of everyone, and making sure that they can all participate in this climate revolution and not be left behind. So just a couple of thoughts on people and getting people involved in this.
I have to chime in on your comment on the 8200 graduate. So as an 8200 graduate, I call to everybody here that is from 8200 or from 81, guys, forget cybersecurity. Climate is the best business. Fixing the planet is going to make trillions of dollars and do good for the planet. So we're not tree huggers. Yeah, we're going to make real lots of money here. Now, going about best practices, one thing, and this is super important, right? This is hardware. This is manufacturing. This is scaling manufacturing. This is, if you wish, connecting the high tech with low tech. Yeah. So most of our companies, they need blue collar employees. And imagine or not, at least in Germany, it's very hard to find them. It's very hard to find skilled blue collar employees. By the way, you can earn a lot of money if you're a skilled employee in this area, as good as in the high tech sector. Now, the point is that think about it. Think about your supply chain. Think about your manufacturing from day one. Where are you going to do that? Where are you going to have a good supply of engineers? And we've been touring Israel for a few days now. And I tell you, get out of Tel Aviv. Go to Sderot. Go to the north, to the Galilee. There are very skilled people over there that know how to do low-tech, how to do welding, how to build controllers. This is very much needed, and think about it when you start your next company and where you position the company.
Could I jump in on one thing in regards to both not leaving people and markets behind as well as recruiting? I think one of the ways that we have seen a lot of companies actually start thinking about CapEx is looking at what are kind of different non-hubs of manufacturing and talent where it's super expensive. So using food as an example, and being in the US, in this world right now where food security is a big issue, the US can still afford to do it. A lot of the richer countries can afford to buy food, and they aren't facing pressure, and hence there aren't policies in place to help new technologies come up. But when I talk to founders who are thinking about scaling, go to a place that maybe has more concern. They probably have universities with skilled people there who are smart, who are not getting the attention from companies. And you can work with a government and local policymakers and probably build a scale facility for pennies on the dollar relative to California, for example. And then you can start proving unit economics and actually providing for a new market that might get overlooked. So there's a huge amount of arbitrage, for lack of a better word. And also, it's, I think, doing something good, and you're going to be creating flywheels in new countries where new founders, entrepreneurs, and technologies happen. So it's a really, really big opportunity.
That's great. Thank you. So just Yair, you're Israeli. You've been making investments now. Why? What's causing you to come and bring your whole team here? What are you most excited about the ecosystem in Israel?
Well, I think that a few years back, I'm living in Germany for the past few years, and I've observing the automotive industry, right? And Germany is manufacturing a lot of cars. But how many automotive startups are out there in Germany? Very few. How many automotive startups do you find in Israel? At least 400, 500, 600. The last car that was manufactured here was eaten by camels, right? So how much emissions is Israel emitting? Anybody knows per year? What is the annual emission of Israel? It's 80 million tons a year, okay? Germany, 800. So Israel is not, the impact of Israel on the climate in its emissions, you can say it's relatively low. It's not that we can rest assured and say we do nothing because we're so tiny. But the point is that Israel has a lot of innovation. It's a young country. There is a lot of technology coming out of the university, out of the Technion, out of the Weizmann Institute. Take a company like ours that H2 Pro were invested. An entrepreneur that comes from the digital world goes and searches for unique technology coming out of the Technion, and when you marry the two, amazing entrepreneurship skills and amazing science, and as we said, it's CO2. We need chemistry, we need real science, and when you marry the two, you get magic. And this is what I think can happen in Israel.
What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, IndieBio gets approached by a lot of places to set up shop, and it's interesting. We think of what is the pieces that you need to make a startup hub, and I think a lot of people have said this about Israel. It has all the pieces around the technology, the science, I think the culture, the people. There is investment here, so I think Israel has the things we look for. We want to take extreme amounts of risk, like we're the earliest stage of investor, so I think there's a lot of people here who are excited to do that. We've made 4 investments in the last year in Israel. Hopefully we make a lot more. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Can you name a few?
I mean, I think they're all here. You guys can stand up. Ingrediome, Asterix, Climate Crop, and Nitrofix. Go visit them. They're all, I think, have booths and stuff. So they're reinventing proteins, crops, and how to make ammonia for green fertilizer.
That's great. So you guys are both making me look bad. I have not done any investments out of this fund, but I do have a couple of investments that I've done.
We have a few that we want to show you.
Yeah, sure. So I did actually invest in a cybersecurity company myself many years ago. So I'm changed now, and I'm focused more on climate, which was Clarity, and then also invested in a company that's actually presenting here in my previous fund called Tomorrow.io that's working on climate-related solutions for data-related solutions for climate. Maybe just as I haven't done anything so far, I'll tell you a little bit about why I'm excited. We don't think that science is limited to MIT or Stanford. So we actually changed the way our fund was set up. We've now made it a global fund. We're investing up to 40% of our $485 million outside the US. And we think that good breakthrough science can happen everywhere. And we're extremely excited to be able to find opportunities here and invest in opportunities in Israel.
Excellent. So thank you, guys. Before I wish you everybody Shana Tova, Happy New Year, 2 takeaways. 1, CO2 is a molecule. You cannot blockchain it away. 2nd, fixing the planet is damn good business. Shana Tova.
Thank you. Thank you.